Okay, so right off the top, we've got that breaking news on the war with Iran. Iran says it's chosen to just walk out, suspending talks with the U.S. on ending the war. Their reason? It's over Israel's continued strikes on Lebanon. Now, that word from Iran comes with a threat to, quote, open up the war on other fronts. So let's go live to CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. This is a big breaking news item there. Iran suspending it. What do they mean by expanding the war to other fronts?
Yeah, Reed, it's good to be with you. What they're saying this morning, at least what we have heard from Iran's state media, is that they are willing to suspend talks with the United States at this moment. If you'll remember, they've been handing back these memorandum of understanding notes back and forth for the past several weeks. But now at this point, given the expanding Israeli front into Lebanon, Iran says through their state media that they are willing to abandon the ceasefire, abandon talks. Now, all of that, of course, is incredibly notable. There was also a threat this morning from the Iran Revolutionary Guard that they would expand the war from the Iranian standpoint into the Strait of into the Red Sea, which is where we've seen some of the Saudi Arabian oil ships transiting through, trying to circumvent the Strait of Hormuz. So they're talking about expanding the war at this point because the ceasefire talks have really fallen through. This is a very fragile moment right now. We have not heard from the White House on a response as of yet. If you'll also remember earlier this morning, around 1 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time, President Trump said, as far as the negotiations were going, telling people to just sit back and relax. It will all work out well in the end. But Read, hours later now, there are questions about whether the ceasefire is in place now that Iran, through their state media, is saying they are planning to suspend talks with the U.S.
All right, so meantime, we do know about those new attacks between the U.S. and Iran. Of course, over the weekend, U.S. forces conducted what the Pentagon is describing and defending itself as being self-defense attacks on several Iranian drone and command sites. Does this and what we just heard mean this conflict is now escalating?
Well, that is a good question. It would appear so. Over the weekend, we did see the Iranians shoot down an American drone that they say was flying over their airspace. The U.S. says that it was flying over international airspace, and it was allowed to be there. There were then drone strikes that were sent into Kuwait where U.S. forces were. Those were intercepted. Those did not land, according to CENTCOM. But still, we have seen this trading of fire around the strait, but now it does seem like it is expanding back into the countries where there are U.S. forces, like that base in Kuwait. I should note that base was attacked in the early days of the war, and we saw several service members killed and injured there in a very violent attack, certainly escalating back to that point, even though the president has said they want to, that if there are no ceasefire talks, he will continue bombing. They've been working at the diplomacy because they don't necessarily want to go back to that point, putting service members back in harm's way. But with this escalation, the question is, what is the U.S. willing to do at this point going forward?
All right, Olivia Rinaldi on that breaking news. Iran suspends talks with the United States. Now let's talk to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. He's covering the military angle and how this works.
So there have been multiple developments to report. Most recent is a statement from U.S. Central Command. They're in charge of U.S. military operations across the Middle East. They say that overnight, U.S. forces successfully intercepted 2 Iranian ballistic missiles targeting American forces based in Kuwait. So no American personnel were harmed while still supporting the ceasefire that is looking shakier by the day. So that came after Iran's military branch said they had launched an attack on a U.S. base, but they didn't really specify which one. So officials have also told us that over the weekend, U.S. forces launched airstrikes on 2 Iranian positions along the Strait of Hormuz. One of them was on the shore, on the coastline, another on an island, saying U.S. fighter jets eliminated air defenses, a ground control station, and 2 one-way attack drones. And we're now hearing that Iran's Revolutionary Guards have stopped exchanging messages in whatever diplomatic process was underway in protest of Israel's incursion into Lebanon, which has gone deeper into the country than we've seen in the past 26 years. This is the 3rd time Iran is has targeted a U.S. military facility in Kuwait with a ballistic missile in under a week. It's a serious escalation from like drone attacks, which we've seen a lot of, even as a ceasefire is supposedly in place. In the last one, or the previous one, last Wednesday, CENTCOM said firing a ballistic missile was an egregious ceasefire violation. That was intercepted by Kuwaiti forces, and we're told 4 U.S. service members and 3 contractors received minor injuries from the fallout, but they returned to duty within 24 hours. So this is a serious escalation, and now we're just waiting to see how the U.S. military responds. Back to you.
Charlie Daggett, thank you so much.